They were chosen specifically for this project. I think 12 firms responded to the city's request for qualifications, and a group of city professionals and with some people from the community selected them as the firm best suited because of their experience and their expertise. First of all, just wanted to have a show of hands. Who came to the first meeting? All right, everybody that didn't raise their hand, I'm sorry, you have to leave. No, I'm kidding. No, I'm kidding. No, I was just curious. We're going to recap the first meeting and then move on. A couple of things first. If you could silence the phone, hold your questions to the end. We're going to have a question and answer period. If you hadn't already, please fill out the sign-in sheet when you leave. We record minutes and distribute them to everybody that gives us an email. You'll actually get slides from the full presentation. So, why don't we go to the first slide? Oh, do I have the clicker? I do. Which one is it? This one? There we go. First of all, let me talk a little bit about the schedule. Let's see, I guess I have a laser pointer here too. Woo-hoo. Okay, we commissioned Urban Robot November 1st. We've had one community meeting. We're currently obviously on our second meeting, and we're planning another meeting in the near future. I'll talk a little bit about the schedule. Once we go through all the community meetings, there'll be presentations to the architectural board, historic board, to the commission. Once we get past all that and we get everybody's input, Urban Robot will then go to what we call design development and then preparation of construction documents. This project is rather large, so it will be bid out. And you can see the timeline that we're anticipating in terms of construction. So we're looking at construction completion probably 2 years from now. I'm going to talk a little bit about the first meeting to recap for those of you that were here and for those of you that weren't. The first meeting was on December 12th. The first thing that we discussed is the project budget. We have $3 million allocated for this project, which roughly turns into about $2.5 million worth of construction. So we're tasked with making sure that the project doesn't go over budget and trying to find the best use, get a best bang, basically, for that money. Also discussed at that first meeting, we gave a little history of the park, and which was part of Merrick's original master plan for the city. This was basically the craft village area. This was supposed to be the center of the craft village. We talked a lot about the surrounding areas, and Justine will get into that a little bit more. And most importantly, the Agave development that's going up right across the street from the park. And we discussed with everybody that was there the current use of the park, the events that happen on the park. We got everybody's input as to what they thought would be the appropriate amenities to add to the park and what their priorities would be. Again, we have to keep the project within budget, so we can't do everything that everybody wants, but we want to try and do as much as possible. Most importantly, we were here to basically get the community's input. We did not have a design. This evening, you will be looking at the preliminary concept design, and I underline preliminary. What you see here, I can guarantee you, probably will not be what gets built. This is a very long process. We are here to get everybody's input. There'll be a lot of agencies involved, but this is our first shot. Let's see, where am I here? Okay. Now, basically we use this slide to show everybody that our scope is not just the park. Probably the most important thing we have to do is make it safer to get to the park. That's one of the reasons why the park is underutilized. We have a bit of an indie racetrack around the park. I'm not going to tell you how, what our solutions are, because that's what Justine will be explaining. You can see the Agave development here. You can see 2800. This whole area is developing very rapidly, and the population of this part of the city is going to change in the very near future. A little bit about what we're going to cover this evening. I've always been told that when you give a presentation, you tell everybody what you're going to present, you present it, and then you tell them what you presented. Sounds simple. We'll be talking a little bit about this evening about our goals, as well as the priorities from the last meeting and how we've implemented those. Most importantly, we'll be presenting a preliminary concept, and I keep saying preliminary. And then, of course, we'll end up with a question and answer period. So again, hold your questions. With no further ado, Justine, if you'd like to come up.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Justine, and I'm here with a wonderful team of designers, including Peter, Dina, and Wally, and many others back at the office. And we are just thrilled to be involved with this important park project in Coral Gables. Last time, as Brandon was mentioning, we covered a little bit more of the architectural and the historical side of the park, where we talked about how this is really one of the few urban parks in downtown Coral Gables. The other one is right here, and another one in front of City Hall, but really within walking distance of Pond Circle Park. There aren't any other green spaces, and we think that it's critical to make this one as beautiful and, most importantly, as useful to what you need as a community, and we are here to do that. So the way that we started is by meeting with you, many of you, back in December, and we really asked for what you would like to have in this park. What do you want most? What do you want to do? What do you want to use? And these were the results. Basically, everyone here was given 3 stickers, and they were allowed to vote on what they would prefer, and these are the results in front of you. We tallied these into an easier to read bar chart, and what came out of it is that everyone wants shade. And we all live in Florida, South Florida, and we can all understand that. So the top result was a shade structure, but also a lot of votes for things like native habitat, shade trees, there's that all-important word again, benches and seating, farmers market, kids playground, among many other things like walking paths, yoga, or lawn areas, large open areas, and outdoor games, and as you can see, a lot of other different activities, but most importantly, the top 6 are listed there at the top. So we really took that as a starting point for the design of the park, but before I get into the design of the park, which is really, really exciting, we want to talk about what Brandon referred to. How do we get you there safely? How do we get your children there safely? And so what we're showing you here in this slide is what exists today. This is the road system. North to Miracle Mile is over here on the left, and south to Bluebeard is over here. So this is Agave, and this is the 2800 building with Regions Bank. So what we're proposing to do is a number of things, about 4 or 5 major elements. The first and most important one is that we would like to incorporate very large raised intersection crosswalks with a very distinctive painted pattern. And we'll go into what that pattern may or may not look like in a moment, but first we just wanted to point out that there will be about 45-foot wide raised intersection crosswalks at all 4 corners of the park, which will function not only as a visual cue to motorists to slow down, but will actually function as a speed bump because they will be raised, and it will encourage or force motorists to slow down, so that will help a lot. Another thing that we're doing is we're going to narrow the lane width. Currently, they are 13 feet. We're going to reduce them to 11 feet. So that's on all sides of the park. Another thing that we're going to do is take a cue from what Agave is doing over here, which is to incorporate parallel parking on here and do so on the west side as well. Parallel parking has been shown to reduce the speed of motorists. And another thing we're doing is we are squaring off this southwest corner. All of the other ones are already squared off, And this also is shown through traffic engineering studies that basically when it's closer to a 90-degree turn, cars have to slow down more, and so that will also increase pedestrian safety. We're also incorporating a trolley stop. Its exact location will be determined later, and all of these things are of course subject to discussion with the city, but essentially, we as designers and the city team as well is committed to making this park a place that's safe and easy to get to. Once you're there, this is, so here are the crosswalks. So basically what we want to do now is kind of layer in the different things that we're proposing, and then we're going to get to the pretty picture and we'll walk you through exactly what happens once you're in the park. So the first layer are the crosswalks that I've already mentioned. Here what we're showing is the large crosswalks and a potential painted pattern. Our idea currently is that they would be designed as part of the Art in Public Place program here in the city, so an artist would be commissioned to design them, so their exact nature, exactly what they would look like, will be determined down the road. The main circulation spine of our park is this large S that goes through the center of the park. It's then followed by secondary connectors, which allow people to more easily circulate through the park. And our design also incorporates a tertiary level of pedestrian circulation, which is our nature walks. And you'll see these all in more detail in a moment. And the last layer that we'd like to just briefly touch on are the programs. So based on your feedback in December, we've incorporated a playground. Which we'll go into in a little bit, a playground. We've incorporated a very large shade structure in the center, picnic areas, and large lawns, as well as nature paths. So what does this look like in plan? This is the major circulation spine, which allows people to circulate through the entire park. And it circulates through a very, sort of a distinctive central plaza, which will be rounded on all sides by a very large shade structure. The playground we're proposing to be here in the north. We're proposing large buffered areas around the perimeter. And then these would be our large event lawns. For moments where the park department decides to throw a special event, such as Burgerlicious or something else, there could be tents and food trucks put here at that time, or a temporary stage, but the rest of the time it'll really just be a lovely place to hang out when you want sun. When you don't want sun, we totally understand why you wouldn't. In this hot weather, we have a very large shade structure here. So what does this look like? This is really our vision for the plan, for the park. Here, what you can see is what a multi-layered diversity of spaces that will allow people to want to come here again and again for different purposes and at different times of day and with different people, whether it's with your children or whether it's you on your own having lunch during your lunch break at work, or it's coming here for an event or to do a little bit of exercise. There's something for everybody at the park. So let's walk you through it in a little bit more detail. So you can see here again our central circulation spine. It curves you through the site and allows you to branch off and appreciate all the different programs. So this is our proposed playground area here. We'll go into a picture of how that could look in a moment. Here is our distinctive ficus tree. This is something amazing that we anticipate being a really photogenic moment that you will want to come back and see over and over again, and most importantly, sit under and enjoy the beauty of of Florida native habitat. So over here is our event lawn, and then here are also two smaller event lawns that can be used for spillover. And then in addition, and most importantly, our central aspect is a pergola structure, which will really be an iconic architectural moment that we believe will make you remember this park wherever you are. And three different possible directions for this iconic central shade structure are shown here. And these are really just the starting point for discussion. Obviously, all of these things we're looking forward to your input on, but we were inspired by this particular project in Australia, but also other projects which also have really unique shade structures which allow you to have instant shade and also a very architecturally interesting place to be. We imagine people sitting under here for long periods of time on really wonderful sun loungers. And I say sun loungers ironically because they would actually be in the shade of the industry name as sun loungers. So we would have shaded lounge beds where you could play. They would actually function as, play structures, or they would function as places for you to be alone or places for you to gather with your friends and spend long periods of time if you would like. Underneath our dramatic ficus tree, where actually did that go? There we go. Underneath our special dramatic ficus tree on the north side, we would have a boomerang bench, but first the ficus tree. So this is actually an example of one of our own projects. This is a ficus aurea that we brought in two very large pieces. We actually split the tree in half, and we transplanted it to this particular property in 2018, and it's still thriving today. So it goes to show you how these plants are very flexible, and you can bring in a really iconic Florida native plant and create a wonderful space underneath it. As you can see, it has a very large 35-foot canopy. Underneath that, what we envision is something that we're calling the boomerang bench. And again, this is something that we would be designing in detail, but these are some of the images that we were inspired by when we were designing the park. Essentially, a place where you could sit and lounge and also eat maybe lunch, talk to your friends, or just enjoy some time in nature and have your kids play around on it at the same time. Speaking of playing, we would like this playground, being in the iconic park that it is, to be actually a play structure that really functions almost as an architectural sculpture. And we think that that's appropriate for a park of the scale and size. The city of Coral Gables is doing a fantastic job at building a lot of neighborhood parks, but this is more than a neighborhood park. This is more of a community park, a larger, almost regional park, and we want this to be a destination play space. And so we were looking at various different structures. There's really amazing ones out there now. This one is called, this one is called what is it called, the crab? The crab trap. And then there's the idea of incorporating berms. Certainly incorporating shade is of utmost importance, and so we would propose to use shade sails as shown in this photo. And there's other really, really amazing things you can do that are not even just fun for kids, but they're really multi-generational. I personally have been to this park, and it's a great place to just run around. So there's a lot of different interesting things we can do. There's the shade tree. And going back to the crosswalks, the idea is that they would be raised. So this is an example. Basically, they act as speed bumps. Ours would actually be much larger than this. This is just an indicative photo. And they would be painted. And again, the exact pattern and design of that would be, up for design and in cooperation with a public artist. Another thing that we gave some thought to is surfacing. In other words, the paving and what you would be walking on. We think that it's really, really important that there be a differentiation in all of our 3 different circulation types so that you have a diversity of experience when you're here and you feel both grandiose spaces and big spaces where you gather with large crowds, all the way down to spaces where you want to be all by yourself. And a lot of that is determined by the materiality and what you're walking on. So we're looking at all these different surfaces, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with really cool patterns within the playground, but there's also amazing things you can do with concrete and with pavers, and even composite wood that will allow you to create this diversity of experiences for everybody and all different types of people and all different types of circumstances. One of the things that we wanted to do was also show you the park in cross-section, but before, just a really quick recap of the park layout, because I know I've been doing a lot of talking and also showing a lot of images, so how those things lay out again. Basically, this is the playground area. This is our large distinctive ficus tree with the boomerang bench underneath. This is our iconic central shade structure and the large event lawn, and our nature paths, our narrower paths that meander through lovely planted areas. There may be an opportunity in the future to incorporate a few more programs because there were votes for things like a butterfly garden or exercise equipment and other things like this. And if budget allows, there may be an opportunity to incorporate some of those in little spots along these paths, but that would be something that would have to be investigated further down the road. So the section that we're going to show you in a moment is cut through the ground here and looking this way. So if everyone can visualize that section cut through the ground, I'll move on to this next image. So this is you looking south and looking at our park. So Agave is over here, Regent's Bank is over here, and you're essentially looking south towards Bird Road. So here's our iconic central shade structure here. Obviously the design of it is still very, very conceptual. We're really at the beginning. The idea is that it would be covered in bougainvillea or some other very locally adapted plant that has flowers. And in really accompanied by a central collection of palm trees here, which would provide some dappled shade. And these are our nature walks and along the side, and in general, the planting throughout. We're gonna definitely be incorporating some of the existing trees there. There are some oaks and tabebuias that are in quite good condition and are quite large and mature. We think that they should either stay where they are or be relocated elsewhere in the park. So we're showing those larger trees here. And just a quick view of one moment in the park. Again, everything in the design is very preliminary, but we wanted to give you a sense of the spatiality and of the different elements. So here you're crossing the crosswalk on the northeast side of the park, and you're coming to our very large iconic ficus tree with the boomerang bench beneath. Some sort of interesting play structure to be determined with your input, and the planting area that takes you off to the left and all the way down to the southwest of the park. So with that, we've sort of covered the major aspects of the design, and we're really looking forward to your input. Again, thank you so much for being here tonight, and we're looking forward to your feedback.
So we're ready to start taking questions, or okay, there we've got one.
Yes, Javier Baños, 1801 Casilla Street, Coral Gables. What I was wondering is, what architectural style are you using? Because the city has a certain feel, and my concern is some of those areas are very beautiful, but also very modern. And my general feeling was, if you bring it sort of city beautiful style, sort of Mediterranean Spanish, Andalusian motifs probably will be more attuned to the area.
So that's actually a really, really thoughtful question. Thank you so much. We pride ourselves at Urban Robot Associates for not having one particular design style, and so we really welcome your input. If the community is interested in a particular style, we are absolutely happy to look into that. If you look at our other things that we've built, our portfolio, you'll see that we've built in all sorts of different styles. So I do think that that's really relevant. I think though that we sort of saw this park as a little bit of an extension of Miracle Mile, and more intended not only for the local residents, but also for visitors from elsewhere in the city who may be visiting Miracle Mile and wanting to see some other areas. And so we were interested in these images, but these images are just placeholders. So are you saying that you would prefer to stay more within the City Beautiful style?
Just selfishly, it's our $3 million, so probably it should be consistent with what we essentially bought into. But from my perspective, do you have anything to say, Bud? From your perspective, I was wondering what the children's area was going to look like. But my view is if it's going to be something that we are going to invest into, not just for the tourists, but for us to actually enjoy, it should be consistent with at least what we have come to enjoy of the city itself.
Right,
it should
City
be
Beautiful.
The City Beautiful, so it should be in that style. Now, we also have little villages in every single area,
Yes.
so I don't want to have one particular look if it's not consistent with that, but certainly that should be a key part of incorporation of what happened.
Okay, thank you so much for that input, that's very helpful.
Yeah, piggybacking on what the gentleman said, bear in mind those two buildings that the park is gonna tie together, they're both in Mediterranean, quasi-Mediterranean style. So to do something that clashes with them, in particular the rainbow crosswalks that we have in City Hall, I mean, in my estimation, they're tedious, they clash
Yeah.
with the architecture of the city.
Okay, that's very interesting input, thank you. I think, it really is important to emphasize that the graphics we're showing are really placeholders, but your input is wonderful, and we'll definitely be working on that. Yes?
I actually have a different view. I'm an architect, and I actually think that diversity is gonna be good for the city. I think there's too much Mediterranean, in my opinion, this is my opinion. I think there's too much Mediterranean, we focus too much on the Mediterranean. We need more modern, I mean, it's, 21st century, I think we need more modern aspects of our city. We're kind of stuck in the Mediterranean, but that's my opinion. So I'm very happy with your images, I think it's a great one.
Oh, thank you. I mean, these decisions haven't been made yet. That's exactly why we're here to get everyone's input. Yes?
I'm not exactly sure I understand how you're going to enter the, you said it's raised, but are you talking about a little bit off?
No, it's basically like a speed bump. It's raised 4 inches, only it's wider. So you'll be walking across the raised area.
So it's where you cross now?
It's a slanted, it's a little slope, like a tiny little slope that your car, needs to drive up onto, but it's only about 4 inches tall. So it's just it's a little speed bump, but they call it a speed table in some communities, because you basically go up and then this is flat, and then you go back down again, but it's just 4 inches, and it forces you to slow down a little bit.
So if I may, right now when you walk out of the intersection, you have a curve, so you're dropping down and you are great with the speed, and then you go back up on the other side. Instead, you'll be going straight through, the cars will be the ones who have to go up and down as opposed to the pedestrian, so you prioritize the pedestrian versus the vehicle. So that's the concept, again, concept subject to all sorts of reviews and approval, but that's what is being looked at.
Thank you.
Does that help?
Yes, very much.
Okay. Yes?
The images that you put up are just wonderful. They're very creative, and I can't, in my mind, scale them down to the area that I live in the street.
Well, I'm glad you're saying that because,
Before I could release.
yeah, they will be scaled down. Again, these are just images to
They
give
may
you.
disappear, their value with visual value could disappear by making them half the size that they're now. So that is what I had to deal with.
That's a very interesting comment, and it is one reason why we actually haven't stuffed a ton of program into the park. What it has boiled down to really is a central shade structure, a large tree with a cool bench under it, and a playground space. And the rest is natural planting areas and paths and running trails and event lawns, or just lawns in general. So there's not much that's been stuffed into there. So the few programs that are there, the shade structure, the tree, and the playground, will have some room to breathe. And just to show you a little bit of scale, I mean, this was drawn to scale, and it kind of shows you how definitely it feels like a space that you can be under this tree here. And this park would have a fence around it, of course. We're not showing it because otherwise you wouldn't even see what's inside it. But this is definitely, community-sized playground. And then in terms of its scale, there's also an interesting comparison here where this is to scale the height of the Regent's Bank and the height of the future agave. So we feel that there is room for some interesting program within. Yes.
And you just answered my question, but my concern was if you're gonna have a kid's playground, for there to be a fence, or at least a
Absolutely.
half barrier on.
A fence around the entire perimeter, it's required in new code.
Charlie, yeah, according to code, we have to have, not half, it has to be the whole thing,
Right.
4 feet high.
Yes, if you've been to any of the recent parks, it'll be the same exact aluminum fence that looks like an old wrought iron type fence. Yes, sir.
Any water features contemplated?
Not currently. We just prohibited by the budget, quite frankly. We had explored that. And as a matter of fact, Justine has an aquatics consultant, but at this stage of the game,
We did have that discussion at the first meeting, and the Agave project currently has some water features that'll be right across the street in their lawn. So, and I think we talked about it at the first meeting, that we'd incorporate, there'd be
its function as an office building. So we're hoping people will get their lunch and go across the street, either stay in their plaza or go across the street, to have a sandwich. That's what we would like to see. Yes, sir.
Just two questions. One is, has there been any traffic study done? Obviously, it's a major artery in and out of the city.
We haven't. They're required to have a traffic engineer. Agave has done a traffic study. We will be piggybacking on their study once we get to past the conceptual level. In other words, that study needs to take into account basically how we've changed the configuration of the streets.
So
But there will be a traffic study, yes.
it will examine it.
Just to piggyback on that, when the Regions Bank, we own business on the southwest corner. When Regions Bank came in, the city gave away all the parking spaces along the west side in front of Regions Bank.
Mhm.
There's an extreme issue with not enough parking, okay, in that area for the businesses.
Yes, we certainly agree with you. Again, we are relying very heavily on Agave. Was it 2,000 parking spots? Yeah,
Are they
just
free?
No, I don't think
Are
so.
they in conjunction with what the city charges for meter parking? See, this is my issue. We have issues for customers now not having parking. We have a private parking lot that we put in at extreme expense for our tenants, which is constantly taken over by people
No,
that shouldn't be there.
Yeah, I understand exactly what you're saying. I always, whenever I go to the park, I park 3 blocks away at one of the city parking structures and just walk over. So we do know that there's a shortage. We have limited parking that we can add. But we've already had internal meetings and we've been directed to try and maximize the on-street parking.
I believe I've seen, yes.
Yes, are you going to have a light for the pedestrians crossing?
Yes, the park will be lit, I believe, the Parks Department.
Traffic light.
Traffic lights. The traffic, there will be no pedestrian lights. We don't believe so.
We had entertained it, quite frankly. And the decision hasn't been finalized, but we think with the raised intersections,
But still, the children are gonna use it. Sometimes they might not be accompanied like teenagers. I think that the cars can go faster on the curb. I think there should be some.
they won't be, yes. No, we have entertained it, and it's not that decision has been finalized. So we are still considering it, yes.
The only way you could actually do light would be like a mid-block crossing type of light. And those would be those black beacons.
Or something like they have in Coral Ways. That's very.
But I don't know that you would put those at an intersection, for example.
One of the challenges that we have is even though these are all city roads, the county still has jurisdiction over traffic, signalization, striping. So we would basically be asking the county to provide flashing lights, and we would be dependent on them maintaining them, installing them. Fred tells me there's a flashing light right here that,
very difficult to maintain.
Yeah.
County does-
it hasn't, how long has it not been operating?
We go through a long periods of issues for maintenance. We make requests, we have to wait a long time.
And honestly, that's why we steered away from that, because it would be outside. But that, again, has not been finalized. We understand where you're coming Yes, sir.
I would like to comment on that, like I was with Agave, I was Beckman. I think the traffic, the pedestrian lights are very important. I know, I understand the problems of maintenance, but the whole thing, the success of this park is depending on access to it.
Absolutely, you're
I've lived there for
100%
3
right.
years, and one of our staff has been hit by a vehicle. And I wonder if these tables are enough, if you guys think that's enough to slow cars down.
So
Because,
there are some other solutions. I mean, one thing to mention, first of all, is that the traffic study will definitely be looking into these pedestrian safety mechanisms. And so hopefully we'll have some answers on that from some engineers about these speed tables, essentially speed tables. And not only speed tables, but very visually prominent speed tables. We do believe they'll be quite effective. That said, I think there are some flashing lights that are not the same as what's been installed, but for example, bollards, which could be entirely on our land. So that would look something like this image. So they are visual cues during the day, and then they have lights at night. So if you see these are actually they're actually on the side of the table along the sidewalk, and they wouldn't even be within the county right of way. They would be in the city, and so then they could be maintained. And they also add to pedestrian safety.
we were thinking, and we've always envisioned getting rid of asphalt and changing to pavers also. To really set the drivers that this is not a speedway, this is, so, I think we're doing that everywhere else on Coconut Grove Drive in Palermo on our side of the project. I think, again, I'm not gonna comment on the playground, all I think that's very beautiful, but I think we need to solve access to it and turn it from an oversized median into an accessible area. Once we do that, I think the remainder of the budget should be allocated to anything that we can afford, shade structures. I think you guys have the right ideas. I mean, we like that. But if we cannot have safe access for kids, unaccompanied minors, no matter what we do there, it's not gonna work.
Yeah, one of the possibilities for the raised tables is to put pavers on those, because then you're not only going over basically a speed bump, but then of course you've got the difference in material. And that definitely slows people, so we definitely are considering that.
That would be a lot.
Yes, sir, I got a new
Is it possible to have a speed reduction, like a speed limit change?
We will be, yes, absolutely, we will be
Lower the
asking,
speed limit, and
Yeah, we
cops
will-
are everywhere, they can enforce it.
we will be asking the county for that, but if you go out there now, everyone exceeds the speed,
No.
everybody.
If you put a sign up, maybe they'll slow down.
Well, we hope it, all these combinations of things will slow down. Yeah,
They do make fiber optic lights and you can run over, like they have at the airport crosswalks, they're
Yes.
much more subtle
Yes.
than that.
Mhm.
And if little kids are running out and they're short, I think they're very vulnerable to get nailed, from what I see. That's it.
Yeah.
So I think that's a must.
Yeah, everyone, needs to keep in mind, this is an urban park. I seriously doubt that you'd have little children, running across traffic. But, we understand that the single most important thing that we need to do is control the traffic and make it safe to get to the park. Yes?
I was wondering about these, I liked all of the ideas except the one about lying around on these things. It seems like they would take up a lot of space. I'm not really sure we want to encourage that.
Well, and I'm also surprised somebody hasn't brought up the fact that, there's a possibility of homeless,
It already exists.
We've already looked at that, we brought that up. The one that we like a little more is, you look at the top one, which is really undulating and has a lot of up and down, and really hard to lay on, and would serve as like a play, like even just a de facto art sculpture play thing. That was kind of more what we looked at when we discussed it internally. I had the same concern, especially these two down here. While they're comfortable, I'm not sure if it fits that area, what we do and what we have to police.
Yeah, but even the one at the top left-hand corner, that provides shelter underneath. So it's kind of ideal for a homeless person to, look at it.
You make a good point.
You know, part of the reason that we put these images up is to get a reaction from everybody. So we're not trying to insist.
We're definitely not gonna shove anything down your
No.
throat, so thank you for your.
They have those at, the Coconut Grove Park, right next to City Hall, Miami City Hall, they have those similar structures up there, so if you need to go see what they look like for in person, that's what they're.
Yes, sir.
Yes, on the crosswalks, I see that you have them painted, which is what they did in front of City Hall. And
Yes.
it's not, I actually, first of all, the rendering is beautiful, and I really like what, at least the imagination you have done, because it really changes what you have there now. So it's a good idea overall. The only problem that I see with those, even though they're quite beautiful, they're also quite heavy for maintenance over the years, because what happens is you have these very bright colors that with the sun, we're gonna have the same issue that we have with the flower, that is fading because of. So you're taking into consideration the fact that we don't want to spend money on the pavers because it might be expensive, but if we paint it, then it's going to be expensive in the long run. So, just consider those ideas before making a final determination. It's beautiful, but
These are all exactly, you're exactly hitting the nail on the head, these are all debates we're gonna have. I see a hand up.
Yeah, I see a little hand.
If you do that thing on the street, if you go out of it, the cars might run over some people.
Well, we certainly hope not.
Sounds great.
thank you very much.
We're gonna try to make it real safe.
Yeah. Couldn't have gotten more honest. Yes.
If you dealt with the issue of noise, and that's part of it right now, between the buildings on each side and the traffic coming through that place is noisy and kind of unpleasant to have a quiet conversation.
It is one reason why.
Yes.
That's considered.
Yes, that's an excellent, because we really didn't cover that. That's one of the reasons for
The heavy
the heavy planting, yeah.
here and here. We wanted, there's so many things to consider, but it's very, very important, we feel, to feel as if you can get away from the city a little bit, right? In some parts of the park. We want there to be a sense of intimacy and a sense of oasis and feeling of escape from the city. And so that's our intention for these areas here and these nature walks, where there'll be benches and things for you to sit on. And then if you want to engage more with the city, or if it's not a hot day, you can be out here in the sunny areas.
Sorry for what it is now, which is, I would not want to question.
Exactly.
Definitely.
We're trying to make it,
It's
shady
been
and lush.
Yeah, the only place that anyone eats lunch now is the extreme, the south, because of those trees.
Two large trees. And so we'll be saving those, and we'll be adding more.
Whatever traffic calming elements we end up with, I would suggest that you may want to consider them further north and further south to start the traffic, to slow down the traffic a little bit further prior to getting to the park. Because since being there for the past 3 years, we've seen maybe 3 cars crash right through the wall, so they need to start slowing down a lot sooner, not while they get, as they approach the park. So maybe at those pork chops or at those triangles, a little bit further north and south.
Further north.
What I was hoping would be speed reduction signs there. But the problem is, you're absolutely right, not everybody pays attention to signs, especially if they're in a hurry, especially in morning and afternoon rush hours. But that's very good.
Just for discussion.
I know no one knows this park better than you. I've hardly ever been there that you weren't there, so.
I mean, it's a good one, and we also have implemented into our program, raised intersections on the back side, by the way.
Yeah, we were inspired by that. It's also sort of common good practice in landscape architecture, but we knew that you had done that, and we thought that it would be great to bring it west. Yeah.
Just to stick with the traffic calming, because I really believe that's the key to success here. Narrowing the lanes is a viable option. But if we enlarge the footprint of the park, I think there's gonna be major civil implications on the road, drainage, and things like that.
At the moment, we are not enlarging the park.
How are you gonna narrow the?
We will be working on that with the Public Works and Parks Department.
What we're proposing, first of all, what you've gotten approved starts to narrow the lanes down. We were hoping to do the same thing on the opposite side. So instead of enlarging the park, because that's going to be very expensive,
This would be grown.
yeah, that would actually move out like 4 feet, which is basically what you're doing, right? I think you're moving out, your curb is moving out, I think 3'9" and reducing the lanes. So we would propose, you've already got approval for that, so we were proposing that would happen on the other side. There's. Yeah.
Please don't say that, and then people will quote. I'm saying if the county needs to get involved and we do that, then it's going to be a lengthy process, and changing the road grid.
This is already going to the.
Okay, well, so we need to make sure we don't lose our budget on that, and we can use it for.
And that's exactly the challenge.
Yes.
It's definitely something that we're working with the city, and we'll consult with you to make sure we all have the same plans that match each other, and we'll work through it. I saw a hand of one, yes.
I love the whole thing. I love the architecture, I love the style, I love the idea, I love it. I disagree with Mediterranean everything. You go to Madrid, the whole city is Mediterranean, they have beautiful water parks throughout the city. I have a question about the trolley stop. Is that gonna be on? So is the trolley gonna stop on where the 2 lanes, travelable lanes?
It's to be determined in the future with the Public Works Department.
Because.
By the way, that's where it's at right now.
Yeah, that's the current location.
That's the current location.
But it stops on the street and.
Yes.
It stops on the street and slows traffic down. In other words, everybody behind it has to stop with it.
Right, but it's not slowing down, it's completely stopped.
That's correct. That's correct.
So that's gonna be the way.
Well, again, there's nothing that's been finalized here,
Okay.
but we've,
If I may add, the alternative to that was to create a loading bay, but that actually creates more conflicted movement. That actually makes it more dangerous, because now you're coming in and out, as opposed to being in a straight line, and you have stops and go. So I don't think that would be, that would make it safe to actually make
Or
it.
it says there trolley stop.
There's a trolley stop right there right now.
Okay, but it's narrow, so I thought that's where the little train goes in.
No.
it currently stops on the street, and anybody that's behind it has
This
to
is just
stop.
conceptual parking
It
spaces.
would pull up here, it would pull up here, and it would block, any cars behind it from, continuing by, like, sitting right there.
And again, it hasn't been.
But it hasn't been.
Yeah, and that location is subject to change. It could move in either direction.
And my second question is, what's happening with the other 2 little green areas? And I know there's a limited budget, and I think you're doing, amazing things.
And that's why we originally had, or I should say Justine originally, her team had concepts where you could walk onto them and then get onto the park. But there's more crossings on ponds in both directions for both of those.
But are they getting any landscaping or?
That's to be determined. We may just slightly beautify them, we may do a little bit more, it's to be determined.
The
Yeah,
bigger the
budgetary
shade, the bigger
concern.
the shade, the better.
Yeah.
But with our current design, we're not encouraging people to go to those.
And we
Because-
couldn't alter the roadway either, so we had to keep, because of the historic nature of the park and the design, originally we thought maybe we'd close it, that would expand it, but because of the historic nature of the park, we weren't allowed to change that, so.
Yeah, let me explain that in a little bit more detail. The whole street grid in this area has been designated historic. So we're kind of limited. We kind of discussed and looked at the possibility of closing off both of the round portions, on both sides, so that you would create one larger park.
Oh,
And also traffic implications to that.
Yeah.
right.
That may not
No, I
be able to
didn't
be
mean that,
reconciled.
I meant, are they getting new landscape, I mean, like, right now, there's one twig with one, like.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's like, what is this, why don't they just chop
Yeah,
it?
they'll
That would look better.
yes, they'll get some landscaping, but
No, that's.
to be very honest, we decided that the park itself was a higher priority.
Just so that it looks cohesive,
Yes.
not one that has everything and nothing here and.
Yeah. Well, thank you for saying that, because again, we didn't really touch on that in our presentation.
Just a thought on that, maybe that's an opportunity for art in public places that complements, no flowers,
That,
something that complements.
honestly, that was another one of our options. If the striping is not allowed by the county, then that's exactly what we were thinking of doing.
Just a suggestion, as far as the trolley stop, and I don't know if it matters or not, but on the west side, it would probably be best to put the trolley stop after the last crosswalk, and then on the east side, again, put it north of the last crosswalk. Right, only because if the trolley stops there, people have to stop, they get angry, and what happens when the trolley starts moving is they zoom around and there was everybody that's right there on that crosswalk. The nature of driving.
Looks like that.
So just, if we
Consider
put
what-
it beyond the crosswalk,
Right.
so that people aren't zooming into, right,
We-
because they have to stop, behind the crosswalk.
This is very preliminary, but one of the things I would suggest that it was probably better to go closer to the northern side, I guess it would be left.
No, right above Rick's Street.
Exactly.
Right above Rick's Street.
Right after the crosswalk.
Right, I mean,
But again,
beyond all
doing
the
that still needs to be
crosswalks.
analyzed,
Right.
and still,
Just a suggestion, go beyond the crosswalk.
Yeah.
Don't let them zoom around, they're already up past the crosswalk.
Right.
I just want to point out the great unknown here. It's good that the folks from Agave are here. Right now, what everyone experiences in this area as it relates to traffic congestion and movement is going to be multiplied to the power of 10 once Agave's project is done. And he's absolutely correct. If you don't solve the problem of getting people to the park and dealing with the traffic there, then you're wasting $3.5 million that's, taxpayer money. I don't know what the solution is, but I know that what you're looking at in the future is gonna be really, really tough, because no one even talks about their deliveries for all their stores and stuff. When their project came out initially, it was all gonna be subterranean. Well, that all changed. So all that's now gonna be surface traffic. So that adds an additional layer of congestion in this whole area. And
one of the things to consider, the one good thing about traffic is that the traffic slows traffic down.
Yeah, congestion. Honestly, congestion.
Well, that's.
I honestly, personally, welcome congestion around the park.
there's only so many ways to go from there though, because of what's happened with the streets there anyway. And you've got a couple of intersections that are absolutely horrendous right now. And one of them is off the end of the pork chop that goes in front of the Zuby building, and you try to make a left out there into the Catalonia, into the surface streets.
We're modifying that intersection, by the way. The county forced us to put a dedicated left turn lane off of Ponce, leading right before Christie's, heading east towards Mata as a relief to that condition. So there are some traffic improvements coming our way.
Really? Which place?
Mata.
Is there anybody else that would?
The
Oh, there we
main
go.
pathways, I think I missed that information. Do you know what surveys are going to be using?
We don't, it's very preliminary right now. I mean, in terms of material choices, it's really something that comes after, the general layout is approved by you and the city. Definitely something durable, but we want something to be really beautiful, so we were looking at some very interesting pavers, with a nice pattern, some interesting colors. Nothing too crazy colors, I just mean, attractive and distinctive in some way. This is our material board right now, but it's, as I said, it's very preliminary. This is for the playground, so nothing to do with the general idea, but this is one, paver pattern that could be nicer, but maybe it'd be nice in shades of beige or shades of pink and beige or something like that. And this is a more distinctive pattern. This is poured concrete with exposed shell. I don't know if you've been to South Point Park in Miami Beach.
Yes.
But that is very beautiful, poured concrete with exposed shell. Something.
The playground will be synthetic surfacing, either poured in place or synthetic turf. Like if you go by the youth center right now, you'll see it's that kind of work. It looks like grass even though it's a playground.
Right. Love it.
So it'll be natural with all these things.
Yes, sir.
Just want to mention that probably when you go to the county, even though you are successful raising those intersections, you will probably be forced to do the zebra striping at the dedicated crosswalk section of the intersection. So you won't have the luxury of making them all beautiful and artistic, because you're going to be.
We're aware that we've got a big, yeah, we've got a big fight in front of us, we know. Yeah.
You have too many designs, so it's gonna look unbelievably formal.
Oh, yeah, we're gonna be very coordinated.
I think the residents of Slow Gables would just like it to be in good taste. In keeping with the city beautiful.
So whether it's in keeping with the city beautiful or more modern, but it will absolutely be well coordinated and not crazy town. We're not gonna have 15 different patterns going on.
Yeah, sure, that's flow.
Yeah, there'll be a flow and connectivity and overall theme and a thoughtful meeting of different materials. It's gonna be very, very thoughtful, I assure you. Yes.
Have you coordinated with the police department about traffic control?
Not yet. Our next step is to set up various meetings with not only the police, the fire department, public works. We chose basically to show the community this concept, to see what the reaction was before we sat down with any of the individual departments. But we'll be going to DRC in the very near future to get their input. Well, thank you for mentioning that, because again, it's something we skipped over.
Will the park be closed after dark, like most of the neighborhood parks are, or will this be a 24/7 thing?
It's not gonna be a 24/7 thing, but due to the fact of its location and its integration with the development that's around it, and it's a downtown park, it'll be available at night. We're not gonna light it up like a stadium, but we'll have some uplighting or some ambient lighting, similar to like Curragh Park is one that we have, which is the old Riviera Park, which you can walk through it. It's not an active park, but we're not a fan of having it completely dark. I think for visibility and safety, you do need to have some visibility. But we're not looking at, we'll have our operating hours and we'll post them, we'll have our signage there as we go. But yeah, it won't be closed at dusk, at sunset, because that's just not the nature of the area. The area is a little bit more active, it's downtown, and you're gonna have shopping, restaurants, everything around there. So.
With all the little nooks and crannies and the shade areas and all these beautiful things that you're putting, are the police committed to policing the area a little more? Because right now, there are a lot of vagrants hanging around in there, and so.
Right, as we start working on the design, that's one of the things that we have to consider. When we go through the design, like, this is initial concept. One of the things that we're gonna be looking at is we're gonna be looking at ground level visibility all the way through, to make sure that we have sight through all that. That's why we're looking at the different things where people can sit and lay and everything like that. So yes, we're gonna, and of course there will be, we'll have our neighborhood safety aid patrols, we'll have our other patrols, and depending on what we see in the activities, our downtown parks for the most part, Merritt Park, Pittman Park, they're smaller than this, so we really don't have that kind of issue there, but this is gonna be a much bigger scale. And we're also gonna have the visibility of the development that are coming in now, right around there, because there's more stuff being built, not only.
So they're very small, so it means that there's no shades, or you will have to wait 50 years to have shades.
We talked about this at one of our last meetings with the city. What we would like to do is make sure to bring in at least some large shade trees. And so what we would like to do is cut on the smaller understory plants, because we know from being Florida landscape architects that this tiny little shrub will actually quadruple in size in 6 months, whereas a tree, as you were saying, takes so much longer to grow in. So it's more important to put a little bit more money towards some large trees and then get little tiny shrubs that, you know, in 1 year they'll be normal sized shrubs. And also that's another reason why we're saving definitely some of the oak trees and tabebuia trees, because they're quite large. And we think that if they were given proper arboricultural treatments, that they would actually flourish a little bit more, because they're a little bit like this.
Any other questions?
Well, thank you everyone for coming. We do really appreciate all the input we've gotten. Honestly, you can always tell when you've had a good presentation when everybody gets involved, whether it's that they like what you've shown or they hate what you've shown. There's no reaction, then you haven't gotten to them. So thank you very much, and we'll be trying to get notice out in the very near future when our third meeting will be. So everyone have a nice evening. Bye-bye.